Welcome to the Shadows of Fear channel. Now I will guide you through a world of darkness, witches, and unknown creatures. I hope this helps you disconnect from your daily routine and relax. To avoid any visual distractions, we will leave the screen black and let your imagination run wild. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your country. Now, let's begin. When I was 17, my mom landed a big job in another part of the country, so we had to move. For me, it was a massive and tough change, especially leaving behind my mates and the school where I'd grown up. Despite the distance, I kept in touch with my three best friends, Leo, Dante, and Bruno. Every Friday night, we'd catch up on Zoom calls just to keep the connection alive. One ordinary night, everything took a terrifying turn because of a video Bruno shared in the chat. It was a normal Friday, about 11 p.m. My parents were already asleep and I was alone in my room. Most of the call was just us chatting about the continental football tournament happening that year. Just as we were about to log off, Bruno dropped a question out of nowhere. "Hey, you lot want to see something pretty weird?" Dante jumped in, eager. "Yeah, what have you got?" Without a word, Bruno sent a file. I opened it, and what I saw sent chills down my spine. A man tied to a stretcher, while another bloke, wearing a mask straight out of a horror film, was slicing off his skin with a scalpel like he was skinning an animal. The guy was awake, screaming endlessly. The video only lasted a few seconds, but it was enough to make me leap out of my chair, stomach twisting. Leo shouted immediately, "What the hell, Bruno? Where'd you get that crap from?" I was frozen, speechless from the shock. When I finally managed to type, all I could say was, "Don't ever send me crap like that again." Even though the footage looked disturbingly real, I tried to convince myself it was just some low-budget gore flick. I couldn't fathom it being genuine. Leo pressed again, "Bruno, where the hell did that come from?" Bruno hesitated, but eventually wrote, "I'll tell you, but you've got to promise this stays between us. Seriously." There was a heavy silence until Dante muttered, "Don't tell me you filmed that yourself." Bruno laughed. "Don't be daft. Of course not. I don't have the guts." We all let out nervous laughs. But then Bruno admitted, "I found it on the dark web." I'd heard about it. A shadowy corner of the internet where illegal stuff gets traded. But I never imagined such twisted content really existed. Then Bruno shared a photo. It was a woman without limbs, tagged doll number 27, with a chilling description of the procedures done before delivering her to a client. That image churned my stomach. Still, I struggled to accept it as real. So I asked Bruno straight up, "How long have you been into this stuff? Why do you even go on those sites?" He answered, "Only sometimes, out of curiosity." But before he could finish, someone else joined the video chat. "Who's that?" we all asked at once. "No idea. I swear," Bruno said, visibly rattled. I tried to leave the call, but my mouse cursor wouldn't move. It was completely frozen. Then the unknown user's camera switched on. They were wearing a pig mask, but not a cheap plastic one. It looked like a real face, skinned and stitched back on. So grotesque, it looked like a nightmare come to life. "Tell me you see the same thing I do," I typed, my fingers shaking. Bruno kept insisting it wasn't a prank. You could tell he was freaking out. The pig man crept slowly towards the camera, and I felt his gaze pierce through the screen. My friend's video feeds froze. Only his image stayed live. Suddenly he spoke, in a low, deliberate voice. "Hello, can you see me? Say you can." I recoiled, terrified. I barely managed to stammer. "What? What do you want?" He replied, "You know that bored feeling when life's just a routine? That's why I'm always hunting for something new, someone new. And today, I think I found what I was looking for." Then muffled moans echoed. The man swung the camera around to reveal a woman without arms or legs, gagged and chained. She was struggling desperately to break free. Seconds later, the pig man raised a huge axe and started moving toward her. I began shaking uncontrollably, hyperventilating. I screamed, "Leave her alone, I'm calling the police." Then the image got even worse. I recognized her. She was the same woman from the photo Bruno had shared earlier. I heard the blows. I jumped out of my chair and it crashed to the floor. I covered my eyes, crying harder than ever before. The horror was unbearable. And then, silence. Everything went still. I lifted my hands from my face and looked at the screen. The pigman was gone. The video call had ended. I was frozen, trembling. It felt like a nightmare, but it wasn't. It was real. I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and when I came back, I typed in the chat, "Tell me you all saw that too." Everyone confirmed. Their devices had frozen too, and they'd all seen the pigman. No one said much after that. From that day on, we made a pact. Never speak of it again, but those images never left my mind. To this day, I still have nightmares, reliving that video. I wake up drenched in sweat, gripped by the same terror from that night. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. What I'm about to tell you weighs on my conscience like a slab of concrete. I'm not proud of it at all. A few years ago, I fell victim to a digital scam that, without getting into the details, left me completely ruined. I was drowning in debt, desperate to find any way to get out of that nightmare. It was during that desperate hunt for survival that I ended up tangled in a criminal network operating in what they call the dark web. Even now, guilt still gnaws at me for being complicit in what I'm about to share, but I know the circumstances don't excuse me from responsibility. 5 years ago, I was just an ordinary person with a decent job and a life without too many surprises. I worked as a nurse's assistant in a public clinic in my country, just enough to pay for food, rent, and transport. Then one bad day, a so-called friend convinced me to invest all my savings into an online platform promising to multiply my money fast. I lost everything. I'd fallen for a scam. Suddenly, I was broke, directionless. At that clinic, there was a doctor who was a mystery to everyone. A respected figure in the medical world with international publications and experience in prestigious hospitals. Yet, out of nowhere, he appeared working in our underfunded clinic, where the pay was a fraction of what he could have earned elsewhere. No one understood why, but everyone respected his reputation. Some thought it was pure vocation, others suspected something darker. I was so desperate back then that I accepted any extra shift they offered. Everyone knew if there was money involved, I was available. And it was in that context that, one day, out of the blue, the doctor called me. It surprised me. We barely exchanged words before. He asked me to join him for lunch. We went to a small restaurant with no one else around except the staff, who seemed to know him well. During that meal, he asked personal questions about my family, my debts, my expenses. I told him about the scam. Then he dropped a question that froze me. How much would you need to make a month to never worry about money again? I thought it was some kind of romantic hint, but there wasn't a shred of flirtation in his tone. I felt confused. I gave him some number and he simply replied, "What would you be willing to do if I paid you triple?" I was speechless. He stared at me, serious, almost sinister. I remembered something my grandfather used to say, opportunities don't come twice. So, even though I had no idea what I was getting into, I told him I was willing to consider it. Then he started explaining. He had contacts, 2 other doctors, several nurses, and someone from the morgue who had already left. He said I wouldn't need to work directly in their operation, but I could move around the hospital unnoticed. What he described next left me frozen. When a birth ended with a stillborn baby, the doctors in his network manipulated things to convince another mother whose baby was born healthy, that her child had also died. Both families would see the same corpse. The nurse in on it arranged everything, so no one suspected a thing. My job was to duplicate records. 2 birth certificates for the same baby. 1 real, 1 fake. Then I had to take the living newborn out through a back exit to a black van waiting nearby, hand the baby over, return like nothing happened, and carry on with my day. I wanted to know what happened to the babies. Before I could ask, he cut me off like he already knew. Said he didn't care, that they were sold on the dark web, making thousands per child, enough to pay everyone involved and still make a huge profit. I was terrified. I wanted to run, but I'd already heard too much. I asked what would happen if I refused. His answer was cold. Once you're in, you only get out dead. Scared out of my mind, I agreed. And just like that, without realizing it, I became part of that sick machine. I wasn't working directly in the trafficking, but I was a cog in the wheel. The first time was a nightmare. I felt sick. But when the doctor handed me $500 cash at the end of the shift, the guilt dulled, at least for a while. It wasn't daily, but there was a month I earned $2,000. Sometimes I was paid just to look the other way during certain procedures. The worst part is how you get used to it. Over time, I stopped feeling anything. I became someone I didn't even recognize. It all ended abruptly a couple of years ago. One night, I left the morgue to deliver a baby. Everything was going as usual, until gunshots rang out. The van sped off, and several men in plain clothes surrounded me. They shoved me into a white car, blindfolded, gagged, and tied me up. I spent nearly 3 hours in that car. Then they took me to a house. Tied to a chair, they interrogated me. I'd rather not relive what happened there. It was days of pure terror. On the 3rd day, someone claiming to be a cybercrime agent showed up. He gave me 2 options: cooperate or disappear. I knew I had no way out. The organization must have known I'd been caught. Leaving without protection would mean death. I cooperated. Thanks to my testimony, they caught the doctor and part of his network. But we were just a branch of something much bigger. Now I live under protection, along with others who decided to speak up. But I know they could find me at any moment. And when that happens, it will be the end. Like they say, karma never forgets. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. It all started when I met Laura back in 6th form. From day one, there was this intense connection between us. It was one of those stories that sounds like it's straight out of a movie. Love at first sight. Not long after, we were dating, and before we knew it, we made things official. Laura was incredible, and over the years, our bond only grew stronger. In nearly 7 years together, we'd never been apart. We even chose the same university course just so we could spend more time together. I know it might sound a bit codependent, but it worked for us. A couple of years ago, we decided to take the next step. We wanted to get married. But as anyone who's planned a wedding knows, it costs more than you expect. I was thinking something small and intimate. Laura dreamed of a bigger celebration, surrounded by friends, family, and colleagues. Though it wasn't exactly what I'd imagined, seeing her happy was enough. The problem was, we didn't have the money, which delayed everything. Still, we started saving, full of hope and excitement. Then a few months later, Laura got a tempting job offer, just what we needed to cover the wedding costs. The catch? She had to move to South Korea for 4 months to work as a consultant for a startup. It was a big challenge. Neither of us had ever been apart that long, let alone on different continents. At first, I was dead against it, but I realized I couldn't stand in the way of something so important for her growth. Plus, it was only 4 months. I kept telling myself that over and over. The only thing that calmed me was knowing she wouldn't be completely alone. Soon after arriving, she told me a colleague had offered to share a flat with her. Her name was Yuna, she was Japanese, and Laura introduced her to me via video call. She seemed nice, which gave me some peace of mind. The time difference was tough. I got used to staying up late so we could talk after her workday. We always spoke at the same time, 3 a.m. for me, 5 p.m. for her. One day, she excitedly told me there was going to be a costume party at work and she was going with Yuna. I thought that was great. She deserved some fun. That night, as usual, I stayed up waiting for her call, but it never came. I started to worry, though I tried to convince myself she was just tired. To distract myself, I opened a Facebook group for expats in Korea that I followed. There, I found a strange post. If you're thinking of traveling to Korea, watch this first. It had a link. I don't usually click on things like that, but something pushed me to this time. When I clicked, a terrible quality video started playing. It showed a blonde woman, naked, hands tied, wearing a white mask with the word slave written on it. I thought it was some sick prank, so I tried to close it, but the file kept reopening over and over. Eventually, I let it play. Then a man wearing a Japanese demon mask and holding a katana appeared. I still thought it was some kind of setup until something happened that I can't erase from my mind. The woman screamed, begged, pleaded. The man looked at the camera, then silently cut her in half. It wasn't an effect. It was real. I froze. My whole body trembled. I couldn't breathe. And worst of all, I couldn't stop thinking about Laura. I tried calling her, once, twice, 20 times. No answer. I called Yuna. Nothing. Then I remembered Laura had posted photos from the party just hours earlier. Seeing those, I felt a bit relieved. She was surrounded by people, smiling. But then I noticed something chilling. In the background of several pictures among the crowd, there was someone wearing the same mask as in the video. The same man, watching closely. I panicked. I screamed. I called her number over and over, no reply. Then finally I got a video call. It was Laura. When I answered, pure terror hit me. Laura and Yuna stood at the edge of a bed, tied up, wearing the same masks as in the video. Next to them was the same masked man with the katana. I started shouting, "Leave them alone! I'm going to call the police!" He didn't respond. Instead, he moved closer to the camera, nodded, and held up a sign that read, "Let's make a deal." Through tears and desperation, I begged him not to hurt them. He showed another sheet with bank details and a clear message. "You have 10 minutes to transfer $2,000 or both will disappear." With shaking hands, I made the transfer. I used the savings we had for the wedding. When I showed him the confirmation, he came back to the camera with another note. "If you call the police, she dies." Then he ended the call. I never heard from Laura again. One day passed. 2. 3. I was losing my mind. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't think straight. Then on the 4th day, someone knocked on the door. It was her. Laura was standing there, alive. I held her as tight as I could. We cried for minutes, but she never wanted to tell me what happened. Every time I bring it up or ask about Yuna, she just pulls away. We agreed not to speak of it and to carry on with our lives. It's been 5 years now. We got married, had a daughter, and moved on. But deep down, that night left its mark on us, like a shadow we avoid looking at. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. The story I'm about to share with you isn't just chilling, it's deeply tragic. Even now, years later, it still hurts to remember. Almost a decade ago, I landed a job as inventory manager at a large warehouse on the outskirts of town. That's where I met Laura, a woman in her 30s who worked with me in the textiles department. We weren't close friends, but we shared plenty of chats during afternoon shifts. She was friendly, had a great sense of humor, and always seemed upbeat. Laura was originally from Ecuador. She'd moved to Canada with her young son, only 7 years old. Her whole family stayed back home, so she was raising him as a single mother with a lot of responsibility. She was usually one of the first to arrive and often the last to leave. In nearly 2 years on the job, she'd never missed a day. So when she didn't show up one morning, I was surprised. I asked a colleague if she'd seen her the day before. She had. Then I checked with our supervisor, who said Laura hadn't called or given any notice. It seemed odd, but I didn't think much of it. We worked together, but I didn't know much about her personal life. Maybe something had come up with her son or some other emergency. Days passed, 1, 2, 3, and Laura still didn't return. Nobody knew where she was. I didn't have her address, only her phone number, which I called repeatedly with no answer. A couple of days later, I noticed a group of coworkers gathered around a phone. I went over, and what I saw froze me to the bone. A video of Laura recorded by herself. She looked terrified. She'd placed the phone on the dashboard of her car and was speaking in broken sentences, saying she'd just driven through a lonely rural area and spotted a dark van partly hidden in the woods. Out of curiosity, she'd stopped and seen 2 men unloading large black bags from the van into another car. One of the bags tore open, spilling its contents onto the ground. Human remains. Arms, legs, even heads. Laura was panicked. She'd sent the video privately to a close friend on Facebook, but her friend hadn't seen it until much later because she rarely checked her account. The creepy part? Laura's last online activity was recorded about 3 hours after sending the video. Then, silence. The friend went to Laura's home, but no one was there. A neighbor mentioned that days before, Laura and her son had left in a black transport van and hadn't been seen since. We immediately alerted the authorities. Laura had no family here, so it was just us coworkers who noticed she was missing. 2 days later, a cleaning crew member found a suspicious bag in a dumpster near the warehouse. Inside were dismembered human remains. Forensic analysis later confirmed they were Laura's. We were all in shock. It was impossible to believe something like that could happen to someone so close. But the question that haunted us the most was, what happened to her son? The friend who received the video decided to share it publicly on social media, hoping someone might recognize something, identify the culprits, any clue. What happened next was even more disturbing. One comment read, "Poor woman, she crossed paths with the dark web collectors. She saw things she shouldn't have. Of course they came for her." Another, even more chilling. "I hope she had no family, because they probably ended up the same, or worse." That last comment had hundreds of replies. I started reading through them one by one. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. Several people claimed that what Laura had seen was one of the so-called mobile units operating for criminal networks tied to the dark web. These vans supposedly traveled through major cities, collecting people or bodies sold at underground auctions. Men and women, but mostly women and children, were treated like merchandise. Some stories even said parents sold their own kids. It was incomprehensible and disgusting. But the worst part? Comments said Laura's video had mysteriously disappeared, and anyone trying to talk about the case was silenced. Some even said it never reached the media, despite police involvement. The most horrifying truth was that in the end, we found out what happened to Laura. But no one, not even the police, could find her son. I never imagined something so awful could happen to someone I knew. But the worst part was realizing, much later, that I'd come dangerously close to that world myself. This happened when I was 17. Back then, people were just starting to talk about the so-called deep web. A classmate of mine, Leo, was pretty tech-savvy for his age. He claimed there were disturbing things hidden there. I never believed him until curiosity got the better of me. I asked if he could show me how to access it. Leo promised to send me a link once he got home. That very night, I got the message. When I opened it, there was a strange search engine and a list of categories on the side. Everything imaginable. One link caught my eye, something about exotic cooking. I clicked, just out of morbid curiosity. On screen was a guy dressed as a chef in a professional kitchen. He had lots of ingredients laid out. In the chat, people seemed excited about what he was going to prepare. Over 2,000 viewers were connected. I thought it was some weird animal dish. The chef started chopping onions, celery, carrots, until he revealed the main ingredient. When he opened the fridge, my heart nearly stopped. He pulled out a human leg, complete foot and all. I jumped up and almost threw up. The man laughed as he chopped it and threw it into a pot. The chat was a mix of euphoria and madness. I tried to tell myself it was a prank or fake props, but it wasn't. It was real. I shut off the computer, called Leo in anger, and yelled at him for exposing me to that. He just laughed. Told me the worst part was that many of those dishes were actually for sale. I remembered comments like, "Can't wait for my order to arrive." Since that day, I never clicked on links like that again. Not even once out of curiosity. That image still haunts me in every nightmare. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. A few years ago, I made a mistake so serious I wish with all my heart I could take it back. One of those decisions you can't undo. Something no amount of regret could ever make right. It all started when Clara broke up with me. I was just 19 at the time and completely in love with her. To most, it might sound like the typical case of a heartbroken teenager doing something stupid. And that's exactly what it was, except the consequences turned out to be much darker than I ever imagined. We'd been together for 2 years. Our relationship was intense, but full of ups and downs. We were young, impulsive, and we argued a lot, usually over the dumbest things. But somehow, we always managed to patch things up, until one day, we didn't. One afternoon, I found out Clara had been cheating on me with another guy. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. She just said she didn't feel the same anymore, that she'd fallen for him, and that she was sorry. Hearing that felt like getting punched in the chest. But what hurt most was knowing she'd stayed with me while secretly seeing someone else. She could have been honest, could have talked to me, but she didn't. What really broke me was finding out through other people. She knew it would humiliate me, and still let it happen. I'd been loyal to her, bet everything on that relationship, and all I got in return were lies and betrayal. I was crushed, but beyond the heartbreak, something deeper started to take over. Resentment. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't think straight. I was drowning in this heavy, tangled mess of grief and rage that left me shaking. That's when I made the worst decision of my life. I opened my laptop and decided to dive into a corner of the internet I'd only ever heard whispers about, the dark web. I wasn't some tech wizard or anything, but in that moment, all I cared about was finding a way to make her pay. I never said it out loud, but deep down, I knew exactly what I wanted: revenge. After hours of digging through shady forums, dead links, and obvious traps, I stumbled upon something different. A forum called The Unholy. The name sounded ridiculous, but its tagline pulled me in. Someone wronged you? Add their name to the list. We'll handle the rest. It felt like the perfect opportunity. I still had private photos of Clara, personal stuff from our relationship. I'm not proud of it, but in the state I was in, using them felt justified. Once inside, I realized this wasn't just some gossip board or place for angry rants. The site was divided into sections called bounties, but not the good kind. Each bounty was a different kind of punishment for people the users claimed deserved it. One section was titled The Old Man's Gift, like some twisted holiday joke. I chuckled at the absurdity of the name, probably why I didn't take it seriously enough. There was a form asking for details: name, age, city, social media links. I filled it all in, shaking with anger, uploaded the photos. I didn't include any videos only because the site didn't allow it. But in my mind, it was enough. After submitting, a spinning wheel popped up, decked out in cheesy Christmas lights. It was grotesque and ironic. I spun it. It landed on Ultimate Justice. I laughed. I figured it was just some dumb game mechanic, a joke. The site asked me to confirm the info. I double-checked. Everything was there. I hit send. The next screen was unsettling. A blank white page with one line. "Thanks for adding a new name. The old man will take care of it. Relax. Punishment is on the way. He knows who's been naughty." It creeped me out. Sounded like a bad parody of a Christmas story. Still, I didn't take it seriously. I thought at most her photos would be posted, some cruel comments would follow, and she'd finally feel what I had felt: shame. The thought gave me a twisted sense of justice. I told myself she deserved it, that she'd played with my feelings, and now it was her turn to pay. But nothing happened. Not the next day, not the week after. Her socials stayed the same. No leaks, no messages, nothing. I was confused and, honestly, relieved. As the days went by, a different kind of unease crept in. It wasn't just guilt, it was fear. Some part of me began to suspect that this site wasn't what it seemed. It wasn't just a platform for exposing people. It was something darker, deeper, something I hadn't fully understood. And then Clara disappeared. No one knew what happened. Her family reported her missing. She never came back. I tried to convince myself it was just a horrible coincidence, that the forum was all smoke and mirrors, that none of it had any real power. But I've never been sure. What I did was unforgivable. I can't rewind time, I can't delete what I sent, or deny what I intended. All I have now is the weight of remorse, and the terrifying possibility that I set something in motion far worse than I ever imagined. I should have never sought revenge. I should have never crossed that line. And if anyone out there reads this and ever feels that dark urge to hurt the one who broke their heart, please, walk away. It's not worth it. You have no idea what you might be messing with. After that, everything changed forever. Not just because Emma vanished, not even because of the terrible news of her death, but because that experience opened my eyes in a way I never imagined. I realized the pain I felt wasn't just from the loss, but from what I had been capable of doing, driven by resentment and selfishness. Every night, when darkness wraps around me, I feel her absence like a weight I can't bear, a hollow ache that nothing can fill. And it's not just guilt that eats away at me. It's fear, too. A deep fear. Fear of who I am, of what I might become if I don't learn to rein in this rage that's burning me up from the inside. I've tried to seek help, even from the shadows, because I know I need some kind of redemption, even if it's just a sliver. But I also know there are wounds that never heal, and some mistakes leave scars that never fade. I can't change the past. I can't bring her back. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I can swear this much. From now on, I'll try to be better. I won't let hatred steer my actions anymore. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that revenge only destroys, and the chains of bitterness end up locking us inside our own prisons. Deep down, I'm still the same broken man, only now with a heavier burden. The awareness that what I did had real consequences, and that living with that memory will be my eternal punishment. The last time I heard her name on the news, I knew I'd never forget her, and I knew I'd never forgive myself. But maybe one day, somewhere, I'll find a little peace. Until then, all I have is the echo of her smile and the weight of my guilt, reminding me every single day that the path I chose was the wrong one. And so, with hope shattered and my soul in ruins, I keep going, paying the price for a choice I made without even realizing it. Because sometimes, the harshest punishment isn't a prison cell or the judgment of others. It's the sentence we carry within ourselves. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. I never imagined blood could have any real value beyond just saving lives. When I tried to donate at a blood bank, all I ever got was a few biscuits or a glass of juice. Back then, university was a lot more expensive than I'd anticipated. Instant noodles and ramen had become my staple diet, and every day was a struggle to keep my job while juggling work and studies. One night, I dove deeper and deeper into the hidden corners of the internet, the so-called dark web. I had this strange fascination with seeing what those underground shops sold, though I never bought a thing. Besides, I didn't have the dosh to spare. That's when I stumbled upon a link that read, "Paid blood donors wanted, payments in cryptocurrency." It really caught my eye, so I clicked through. The site listed blood types with prices per 100 milliliters, and the payments were surprisingly generous. I found out my blood type, O negative, was especially valuable, with offers of $25 per 100 milliliters, while common types barely fetched a penny. There was a form for those interested in selling their blood, asking only for blood type, email address, and any medical conditions. Without much thought, I filled it out and sent my details. Then I carried on browsing other shops, cheekily checking prices for rare and exotic meds, although I had no real intention of buying. For a fleeting moment, I entertained the mad idea of becoming a dodgy pharmaceutical dealer, just for a laugh. Minutes later, I got an email with the subject, "Blood for Cryptocurrency." It was a reply to my form. It read something like, "Thank you for your interest. If your blood type is eligible, please send your crypto wallet address and your physical address. On the upcoming Tuesday, place a vial with 100 milliliters of blood in your mailbox before midnight, and we will collect it. After pickup, we will transfer $25 in cryptocurrency to your wallet. Failure to leave the blood or substandard samples will result in no further communication." There were also links to buy a home blood extraction kit and to a video tutorial. I thought this might actually be legit, so I replied asking if I could deliver the sample to a different address instead of leaving it in my own mailbox. They said no, because transport and temperature changes would ruin the blood, so it had to go in the mailbox. I wasn't comfortable with that, but luckily, my elderly neighbor next door probably wouldn't mind if I used his. I sent them that neighbor's address along with my digital wallet details. The next day, the kit arrived via Amazon. The week flew by, and finally, Tuesday night came. Around 9 p.m., when I was sure the neighbors were asleep, I put what I'd learned in the tutorial into practice. The extraction wasn't tricky since I'd donated blood before and had some experience. I filled a 120 milliliter vial, dabbed a bit of cotton on the prick, and sneaked out to drop the vial into the neighbor's mailbox. Then I hurried back inside, making sure no one saw me. Everything was quiet. Perfect. I stayed up, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever would come to collect the blood. I knew they wouldn't turn up before midnight, so I kept myself busy scrolling through my phone and social media. At 1 a.m., I noticed the streetlight flicker and saw a tall figure dressed head to toe in black crossing the pavement. They approached the mailbox, opened it, and took the vial. Their skin was so pale it looked almost ghostly. They briefly inspected the sample and, apparently satisfied, turned around and vanished into the darkness. I felt strangely uneasy, but also excited about getting paid for something I'd only ever given away for free until then. I turned off the lights and went to bed, though my mind was full of questions about what they were actually doing with my blood. The next morning, a new email arrived. Delicious. I'll collect 200 milliliters next Tuesday. Do not reply, your payment has been sent. I checked my wallet and sure enough, there was a bit over 25 pounds in cryptocurrency. I felt a strange mix of emotions, happiness about the money, but also a bit unsettled by the tone of the message. Were they literally feeding off my blood? The idea was bonkers, but the cash was too good to pass up. The week flew by, and once again, on Tuesday evening, I left 2 vials in the letterbox. The tall, pale figure showed up again and took the blood. The following morning, my wallet had grown by another 50 pounds. Another email arrived, this time more direct. Delicious. I want more. They were asking for 500 milliliters. That was terrifying, but by then the gig was worth too much to quit. 2 months' worth of food and rent were on the line, plus the chance to buy some new clothes and a video game or two. It didn't matter if the person was literally feasting on my blood. The money was enough to make me overlook the creepy bit. I ordered more vials off Amazon and waited anxiously. This time I prepared 5 jars. Seeing so much blood leave my body felt surreal, far more than I'd ever donated before. Even with experience, doing it alone made me nervous. I felt a bit dizzy and my pulse was shaking. Still, I went through with it, left the vials in my neighbor's letterbox, and as usual, saw the pale, hooded figure appear to collect them. The payment came through on time the next morning, along with a brief email that just said, "Delicious. Next time, make it a liter." Reading that chilled me to the bone. A liter was a huge amount, but the sum offered, over 4,000 pounds, was tempting. I looked it up online and confirmed it was possible to give that much, though with serious risks. I'd already donated almost a liter over the past few weeks, but I decided to carry on. I ordered 10 more vials, telling myself it would be the last time for a good while so I could recover. The day arrived, and after 7 vials, I started feeling weak, pale, almost on the verge of fainting. By the time I finished the 10th vial, I was shaking uncontrollably. I sat down, put a cold compress on my head, and drank some water. I spent nearly an hour still as a statue, fighting to stay conscious. Eventually, I mustered the strength, took the vials to the mailbox, and left them there. The man appeared like a ghost, grinned with a twisted smirk, checked the blood, and vanished into the darkness. When I woke up, I checked my Bitcoin wallet. The transfer had gone through. But the next message was even more unsettling. Delicious. We fancy another liter next Tuesday. There was no way I could do it again, let alone so soon. I replied asking for a break to recover, but the response was a veiled threat. A liter next Tuesday or else. That, or else, chilled me to the bone. I didn't know what it meant, but I was certain it wasn't good. I tried to back out, but the message kept coming, always with that implicit threat. I shut down my computer and sank into a state of fear and paranoia. The following Tuesday, I didn't draw any blood. I sat in the dark by the window. At exactly 1 o'clock, the figure appeared, dashed to the mailbox, lifted the lid, and instead of taking anything, started frantically rifling through the letters. Then it let out a hoarse whistle, like a scream of despair, and stared up at the sky. It fixed its gaze on my window. Terror rooted me to the spot. Its pale skin, dark eyes, and the complete lack of eyebrows gave it an utterly inhuman look. Finally, it turned, crossed the neighbor's garden, and broke into their house through a side window. Shortly after, I heard blood-curdling screams and gunshots. I rushed outside and was horrified to see my neighbor lying dead on the floor, with bullet wounds and deep marks on his neck, as if some wild animal had attacked him. The creature escaped through the broken window and vanished into the nearby woods just as the sirens wailed closer. The police cordoned off the scene, and although they questioned every neighbor, I couldn't bring myself to tell them what I knew without incriminating myself. I knew it was my fault. I'd put that blood in the mailbox, and that's why my neighbor was dead. Guilt and fear gnawed away at me. The next day, every trace of my communication with that entity had disappeared from my inbox. It was as if it had never existed. Yet at the crime scene, the police found traces of a whitish body paint, the same as the figure seemed to have on its skin. That's when I realized the being wasn't some supernatural vampire, but a psychopath with delusions and dangerous methods. I never heard from it again, and I never spoke to the police. I just wanted to get as far away from that nightmare and the deep darkness I'd uncovered online. Sometimes, on the quietest nights, I still think about that figure and the vial of blood that left an indelible mark on my life, and what might have happened if I'd kept feeding its demands. Since then, I've lived with a silent dread, aware that some shadows are better left unlit. The experience taught me that some secrets are far too dark to be dug up, and that the price of curiosity can be far higher than any material gain. That mix of terror and guilt haunts me, reminding me that not all that glitters is gold, and some offers, no matter how tempting, hide an abyss best not peered into. Though I never found out what that creature truly was, or what might have happened if I'd refused from the start, I know that spilled blood, and that death marked a point of no return. The deep web showed me its darkest, most ruthless side, and I paid the price. Now, I'd rather keep clear of those paths and live with the certainty that some mysteries are meant to stay in the shadows, where maybe it's safer to leave them. If you're enjoying these dark tales and want more, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Shadows of Fear, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every bit of support helps us keep exploring the unknown together. Come, be part of this community, and don't miss a single story. Now, let's continue. Matthew Alexander Falder was born on 24th October 1988 and grew up in a well-off middle-class family in the quaint English town of Knutsford, Cheshire. He attended King's High School in the nearby town of Macclesfield, where he apparently excelled academically before being accepted to study seismic oceanography at Clare College, Cambridge. After completing his undergraduate degree, Matthew stayed in academia, earning both a master's and a PhD. Over the course of his lengthy studies, he went on to become a postdoctoral researcher and lecturer at the University of Birmingham. Everyone who knew him described Matthew as a popular, outgoing lad, well-liked by many, thanks to his great charm and wicked sense of humor. But what no one suspected was that Matthew harbored a dark, disturbing secret. During his first or second year at university, he shared a house with several other students. It was what the Americans call a mixed house, where students were trusted to choose their own flatmates regardless of gender. That's how Matthew ended up living with an anonymous young woman who later spoke out about his shocking and unsettling sense of humor. On one occasion, Matthew joked to the woman about secretly filming her while she used the shared bathroom. The suggestion was so wildly out of line that she just laughed it off as a bit of banter. But the truth was, he had actually been filming her while she showered in that communal bathroom. It wasn't just a joke, it was a thinly veiled confession. And the fact she didn't take it seriously only encouraged Matthew to keep up his predatory behavior. Over time, this man sank deeper and deeper into a web of digital depravity that would culminate in one of the most harrowing and disgraceful criminal cases in British history. Like many of his peers, Matthew spent countless hours working on a computer, writing research papers, and studying. But as a fully devoted researcher, he could be glued to the keyboard for up to 12 hours a day. While others might have found staring at a screen for that long rather dull, Matthew had no such problem. On the contrary, he found the vastness of the internet utterly fascinating, especially when he stumbled upon the deep web. Matthew started to get to grips with something called Tor, which is actually an acronym for the Onion Router. It's a free, open-source piece of software that enables anonymous browsing and communication online. Tor routes internet traffic through a global, volunteer-run network of over 7,000 relays. For those unfamiliar, Tor is essentially a router that protects a user's privacy by hiding their location and activity from anyone conducting network surveillance or traffic analysis. Like any tool, though, it can be used for good or ill. It all depends on the user. In Matthew's case, his intentions were nothing short of sinister. He began using his newfound anonymity to access websites filled with extremely violent child exploitation content, adopting disturbing usernames that matched his twisted behavior: 666 Devil and Evil Mind. But Matthew didn't just watch some of the most graphically horrifying and chilling videos on the dark web, which is saying something. He also downloaded them and circulated them to other corners of the dark net. These videos didn't just depict abuse of children. They included torture and executions of adults, the elderly, and animals, found on sites with names like Wounded to the Core and Unlimited Fun. These were the places Matthew frequented as a twisted form of relaxation after a hard day's work at the university. However, this wasn't the only way he liked to have a bit of fun. He had other methods too. Sometime around 2009, Matthew began catfishing a number of unsuspecting internet users. At first, it was harmless amusement, messing about by contacting online sellers and haggling ridiculously low prices for their goods. But it quickly escalated to the point where he was luring naive young people out to remote locations for dates that never actually took place. Rather than getting bored of these antics, he kept pushing the boundaries, increasing the scale and reach of his schemes. And the more he did it, the darker it all became. It's believed that in the early 2010s, Matthew stumbled across an advert on the online marketplace Gumtree.com, posted by a 14-year-old girl looking for weekend babysitting jobs to earn a bit of pocket money. This is where his twisted mind set him on a path of no return, one marked by depravity and cruelty that would earn him a notoriously grim spot in his country's history. Posing as a similarly aged art student called Liz, Matthew got in touch with the anonymous girl, struck up a conversation, and slowly started earning her trust. As they chatted, Liz told the girl she was drawing or painting a series of still-life images of human subjects, and bit by bit, Matthew methodically persuaded her to send compromising photos of herself, under the guise that his intentions were relatively innocent and artistic. What the young girl didn't realize was that she was about to step right into a vile trap. After securing the teenager's photos, Matthew finally revealed there was no Liz, and told his victim that if she didn't obey all his whims, he would leak the pictures online. He took his time deciding on his first demand, and when he eventually sent his email to the still-shocked girl, she was absolutely horrified. Matthew ordered her to take a photo of herself licking the toilet seat at her secondary school. This task was not only utterly humiliating and unsanitary, but it also served as extra blackmail material, ensuring she wouldn't dare refuse any future demands. It cannot be disclosed for legal reasons due to her age at the time she was victimized, but she later gave an anonymous statement to the British media. "I was ashamed of those photos. They were awful, and I didn't want any of my friends to think I wanted to do that. But I also felt like no one would understand me or believe me, because no one was there holding me down or putting a knife to my throat. No one was physically forcing me, even though that's how I felt every single day for months, the young girl said. In the weeks and months that followed, Matthew sent her text messages with demands that grew ever more twisted and dangerous. Every day, when I woke up, there'd be a message from him. He said there'd be another one waiting for me when I got home from school. Even when we weren't talking, I was anxious, spending the whole day just waiting for the next message to come through. On top of the stress from the horrific ordeal, it had a devastating impact on the girl's studies, her relationships, and her day-to-day life. She stopped talking to her family, stopped going out, and every waking moment was spent trying to appease Matthew's demands to prevent the photos from being leaked. Eventually, he reduced her to his slave. As the girl edged closer and closer to the brink of a complete breakdown, she begged Matthew to leave her alone. She'd done everything he asked, including sending more intimate photos of herself, doing utterly degrading things. The girl confessed she wanted to end her own life, which was hardly surprising for someone so young, enduring such prolonged and daily abuse. Meanwhile, Matthew posted this content on one of his favorite hardcore websites. There he wrote extensively about the torment he inflicted on her and bragged about being the 14-year-old girl in a web of despair and humiliation, claiming that his intention was to break her mentally and that he didn't care if she lived or died. Other diary entries included a list titled 100 Things We Want to See at Least Once. Two of the items included were a girl being used as a slave and a video showing a child's bones being slowly and deliberately broken by an obviously sadistic person. When the girl brought up the subject of taking her own life, he actually encouraged her to do so, saying that he had already uploaded the pictures of her on various dark websites and that if she took her own life, those same images would find their way into the inboxes of her family, friends, and teachers. This man was a true sadist. He truly enjoyed inflicting pain and humiliation on his victims. He enjoyed their despair and watching her break down psychologically. It is unclear when or how the anonymous girl managed to evade Matthew, but we do know that in at least one case he made good on his threats and sent compromising photographs of the girl to her own parents. It is more than likely the same anonymous girl who gave an interview after her ordeal, as at one point she is quoted as saying, "I don't talk to my family anymore. I guess I felt they wouldn't understand. So when I finally told them what happened, they basically said it was my fault, and that's how the relationship broke down." Having completed the cycle of manipulation, blackmail, and abuse, Matthew simply moved on to find another victim. The contemporary internet proved to be a good choice for such a depraved predator, using a series of 70 different carefully crafted fake personalities. Matthew's blackmail operation continued for many years and with many random victims. The identities of most of these victims have changed and remain a jealously guarded secret. But using a breakdown of the charges brought against him, we can piece together a fairly detailed picture of what Matthew forced them to do. Some of these charges are simply too obscene even for a horror channel like this one, but the charges he was indicted on give us a look at how abhorrent his actions were. Some of the less obscene ones were, and I quote, compulsory forced labor. This meant that Matthew had blackmailed one of his victims into performing small tasks for him, essentially turning them into modern-day slaves. Matthew was also charged with 3 counts of participating in the activities of an organized crime group, meaning there's a good chance he shared evidence of his crimes with a large online network of predators. But it wasn't just indecent images that Matthew shared. The UK Crown Prosecution Service later charged the man with 2 counts of possession. It is believed that he simply downloaded one of the Predator manuals, written by another source, while the second manual was almost certainly composed by Matthew himself and details exactly how he was able to blackmail so many different people from different walks of life at the same time. It is almost a given that this manual was found and downloaded by another British predator, a 36-year-old Norfolk man named David Wilson, who admitted to 96 offenses related to child exploitation in early 2021. It appears that the investigation into Matthew's online activities began sometime in 2013, and over the course of the next 4 years, Britain's National Crime Agency would be joined by none other than MI6, US Homeland Security, and Australian Federal Police. The scope and scale of Matthew's crimes were so horrific that even an unnamed Israeli intelligence agency became involved in the operation, naming him as one of the world's most prolific and dangerous cybercriminals. After his initial hearing on October 16, 2017, Matthew pleaded guilty to 137 separate crimes against 46 different victims. 4 months later, he was sentenced to 32 years in prison, plus an additional 6 years without parole. The judge in the case described Matthew as a thoroughly twisted and sadistic man, with devious, persistently manipulative, and extremely cruel behavior, who clearly delighted in the pain and anguish he caused. Can an ordinary day become the beginning of the end? That thought kept circling in my mind as I stopped in front of an old abandoned house on the outskirts of town. It seemed as if time had left no mark on it. The wooden beams creaked in the wind, and the dust-covered windows remained silent, like guardians of forgotten secrets. There was something strange about this place. I could feel it. My name is Oliver. I've always been curious, but today, that need to discover something new pushed me to the limit. A voice inside warned me, "Don't go in," but I couldn't resist. Lately, I had heard strange things about this area, disappearances, unusual noises echoing through the night. No one wanted to talk about it. Why was it so important for me to uncover the truth? As I crossed the threshold, an eerie calm enveloped me. It didn't just drown out the sounds, it seemed to absorb everything around it. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my heart, which was pounding wildly. I hadn't come here just for answers. I had come to find a part of myself. I started looking around. The walls were covered in peeling paint that had once been a bright yellow. Scattered across the floor were remnants of furniture, fragments that might have once belonged to a warm, welcoming home. But now, this place seemed to whisper a warning. Stay away. And then, I heard it. A faint whisper, barely perceptible at first, growing clearer with every step. I froze, listening. It was as if someone was breathing. A creeping sense of unease began to take hold of me. I couldn't convince myself that I was imagining it. But how could this be possible? Who could be here? The question gnawed at me, but the answer remained a mystery. I forced myself to focus. My goal was to find some evidence of what had happened in this place. Step by step, I moved forward, scanning my surroundings. The air felt thick, as if every molecule carried dark secrets. I advanced cautiously, each step echoing in the silence around me. The house seemed alive, whispering forgotten stories through its walls. I looked toward the hallway at the far end, where the light barely reached. What could be waiting there? Suddenly, a strange smell hit me. A stench of dampness and decay, a nauseating mix that made me wrinkle my nose. This place, which had initially fascinated me, was beginning to morph into something unsettling. Every shadow seemed to come alive. Every sound echoed like a scream in the night. I peeked into a room on the left. The air was colder and a shiver ran down my spine. The room was filled with furniture draped in white sheets, like ghosts waiting to be set free. I lifted a corner of one and found an old, dusty, worn-out armchair. Right beside it, a broken mirror reflected fragments of my image, distorted and terrifying. As I turned, I heard a louder noise, a dull thud. My heart stopped for an instant. Maybe it's just the wind, I thought, though logic couldn't dispel the growing unease inside me. With each step, the sensation of being watched grew stronger. I decided to move toward the end of the hallway, where the light faded into shadow. As I got closer, I noticed that the sounds of the house were changing. The faint whisper of the breeze morphed into muffled murmurs. What is happening here? I wondered, my stomach tightening. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but fear had already taken root. Finally, I reached a slightly open door. I pushed it gently, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The room was filled with newspaper clippings, photographs, and scattered notes. Everything revolved around missing persons cases. A map of the city covered one of the walls, marked with red symbols indicating locations. Each mark felt like a silent scream, a desperate plea to be heard. Who had done all this? The atmosphere grew heavier. I glanced back, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, but there was nothing, just shadows dancing in the dim light. Then, a sound that had been lurking behind my thoughts became clear. Footsteps. They weren't mine. Slow, heavy footsteps approached. No, I screamed in my mind, but my legs refused to move as if they had fused with the floor. The room darkened around me, and the air turned icy. The mixture of fear and curiosity shifted into pure adrenaline. I needed to get out, but the sound was getting louder, like a drum marking the rhythm of an impending doom. With one last look at the room, I turned and ran down the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the worn wooden floor. My heart pounded as I searched for the exit. The house, once a maze of secrets, had become a lair of shadows lurking around every corner. The only certainty was that something was following me. Something I might never have been meant to find. I ran, breathless. The echo of my footsteps pounded through the hallway like a drum in a moonless night. Every turn, every corner became a new challenge, and the overwhelming sense of being hunted pushed me to move faster. What was that approaching? The question morphed into panic, and my thoughts grew more chaotic. As I rounded a corner, I nearly crashed into a closed door. Without thinking, I shoved it open with all my strength and stepped inside. The room was small, dimly lit by a sliver of light slipping through a crack in the window. But despite the light, the atmosphere felt suffocating, as if the darkness itself were trying to pull me under. The walls were covered in stains, indistinct shapes, as if someone had tried to draw something onto the worn-out plaster. I looked closer and realized they were distorted, terrified figures. A chill ran down my spine. What did this mean? Could they be the victims of the disappearances? As I explored the room, I heard a creaking sound behind me. I turned quickly and saw a shadow move at the edge of the light. My heart pounded in my chest. This can't be real, I told myself, but my survival instinct screamed at me to find a way out. In the corner of the room, I noticed a smaller door. I knew I had no other choice. I headed toward it, my hand trembling as I grasped the doorknob. The door creaked open ominously, revealing a dark staircase descending into the unknown. With every step down, the light faded more and more, leaving me in near total darkness. As I moved forward, the air grew heavier, thick with the stench of decay. A pressure settled on my chest, as if the place itself was trying to suffocate me. Finally, I reached the lower level. The walls were exposed brick, and the floor was littered with debris. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table, covered in objects that seemed to have been there for decades. A stopped clock, a broken doll, and a worn-out journal. Without thinking, I stepped closer, feeling as if this journal held the key to understanding what was happening. I carefully opened it. The pages were yellowed, filled with frantic notes. The handwriting spoke of a secret community, dark rituals, and sacrifices. Each word sent a wave of terror through me, but I couldn't stop reading. The unseen, the forgotten. One sentence read, "We must feed them to maintain balance." A dull thud interrupted my thoughts. Someone was at the top of the stairs. Panic took hold of me, and I snapped the journal shut. But I knew I couldn't stay there. The shadows were closing in, and with them, the undeniable certainty that something terrifying did not want me to discover the truth. I bolted from the room, my feet moving on their own. I rushed back toward the staircase, but as I looked up, I saw a blurry figure peering down. The face was indistinct, but its presence was deeply unsettling. I couldn't stay here. My life depended on it. Reaching the hallway, I heard a whisper, an echo reverberating in my mind. "Don't go. Not yet." It was as if the house itself was trying to keep me inside, but I couldn't let it trap me. I moved quickly, feeling time slipping away. Every second mattered. The exit was near, but as I ran, the shadow followed, lurking in every corner, making me doubt what was real. Was it really a human being or something else? The line between madness and truth blurred, and my mind struggled to hold on to logic as terror consumed me. Panic coursed through my veins as I hurled myself down the dark hallway. The house's flickering light casting dancing shadows that seemed to come to life. Every creak beneath my feet was a terrifying reminder that this house was not just a place. It was a breathing entity, feeding off my fears. I could feel the breath of the figure behind me, cold and menacing, drawing closer with every second. As I reached a door, I pushed against it with all my strength and stumbled through to the other side. The room was smaller, but at least it was illuminated by a dust-covered window. The air was fresher here, though it still carried the scent of dampness and decay. Around me, shelves were filled with old books, some covered in cobwebs, others worn down by time. What secrets did those pages hold? Without stopping to think, I searched for something I could use as a weapon. My fingers landed on a heavy iron candelabra. Heart pounding, I lifted it, prepared for anything that might emerge from the shadows. Meanwhile, the whisper became clearer. "Don't run, you can't escape." I couldn't focus on that. I glanced back at the door I had come through, feeling as if something or someone was watching me. I knew I couldn't stay still. I had to find a way out. I turned to the window, my last resort. As I approached, I noticed it was boarded up, but desperation often drives people to do the unthinkable. I began striking the wooden planks with the candelabra. The wood splintered with each blow. Deep down, I knew my time was running out, and the sound of metal against wood echoed like the pulse of my growing anxiety. Finally, a plank broke, and with one last effort, I managed to open a small gap. I crouched down and tried to look outside. The drop didn't seem too high, but the yard was overgrown with weeds and shifting shadows. This was my only chance. Just before I jumped, I heard a noise behind me. It was a hissing sound, almost a whisper, but filled with rage. "Don't go," the voice screamed, freezing me in place for a moment. But my survival instinct took over. Without thinking of the consequences, I hurled myself outside. I hit the ground with a dull thud, but quickly scrambled to my feet. The overgrown weeds scratched my skin, but I didn't stop. I ran toward the edge of the yard, searching for a way to escape this nightmare. The shadows seemed to follow me, as if the house itself refused to let me go. The air was thick with a suffocating tension. I didn't know if the figure had followed me outside, or if it was trapped within its own labyrinth. but I didn't dare look back. Every step took me farther from that terrifying house, though its dark secrets still echoed in my mind. When I reached the front gate, I pushed against it with all my strength. It creaked open, and I stumbled forward, once again feeling the daylight on my face. But freedom was only an illusion. The feeling of being watched never faded. I turned to look at the house, and in that instant I saw a figure in the second-floor window. It was a face I didn't recognize, but its gaze pierced through me. In that moment, I understood that something far greater was at play here. The house didn't just hold secrets, it was something alive, something that claimed its victims. And now, it had marked me. With a sinking feeling in my gut, I realized that the nightmare was far from over. I had escaped physically, but the threat still lingered. What had I left behind? And what would happen now that I had opened that door? As I moved away from the house, one question echoed in my mind. Had I really escaped, or had I merely awakened something I did not yet understand? The fresh air outside could not erase the feeling of terror that had settled in my chest. Every step felt like a struggle, as if the ground itself wanted to pull me back. I glanced over my shoulder, afraid that the figure from the second floor was following me, but the window was empty. The darkness inside swallowed any sign of life. The path leading me back to the city was familiar, but the calm I once found in it had been replaced by a constant unease. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had discovered: the newspaper clippings, the journal, the rituals, the idea of a secret community that had been active right under my nose. It was unsettling. How many people had fallen victim to this? And more importantly, who were the ones behind it all? Every sound around me seemed amplified. The chirping of birds, the whisper of the wind through the trees, the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. It all became a symphony of unease. A warning that maybe I wasn't safe yet. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine. I felt someone watching me. I quickened my pace, trying to put as much distance between me and the house as possible. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. As I passed through the park, I saw a group of people gathered. Their faces were familiar, neighbors who would usually greet me, but now they seemed distant, wrapped in an air of conspiracy. I stopped, unable to move forward. "Oliver," a voice called from behind me. I turned to see Clara, a childhood friend. Her expression was filled with concern, and in her eyes there was something I couldn't quite decipher. "Are you okay?" she asked. I tried to answer, but the words felt heavy. "No, I'm not," I stammered, struggling to find the right words. "I was in the house. There's something very wrong there." Clara looked at me with disbelief, but there was a flicker of recognition in her gaze. "You shouldn't have gone. That house has a history many prefer to forget." Clara's words sent a shiver through me, and curiosity took hold. "What history? What happened there?" I asked, stepping closer. Clara leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a story of disappearances, of people who never came back. Some say there's a cult that gathers there and performs dark rituals," she said, her voice trembling, as if she feared someone might hear. "The people in this neighborhood have learned to stay away." A chill ran through me. It couldn't be a coincidence that everything I had found in that house matched Clara's words. But there was something more, something I couldn't quite grasp. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked, trying to process everything. "Because it's not safe to talk about it," she replied, glancing around cautiously. "There are those who watch, those who don't want the truth to be known." Her gaze shifted toward the group of people gathered nearby, and a feeling of unease settled between us. "What should we do?" I asked, feeling time slipping away. I needed to act, but the weight of the situation was paralyzing me. "We should go to the police," Clara suggested, though her tone was uncertain. "But honestly, I don't know if that would change anything." People are afraid to talk, they fear retaliation. Suddenly, a distant laugh interrupted our conversation. I turned toward the source of the sound and saw a man standing at the edge of the park. His figure was familiar. He was one of the men I had seen in the news, a suspect in several disappearances. The realization struck me like lightning. "Oliver," the man said, smiling in a way that sent a chill through my body. "Are you enjoying digging into old legends?" His stare was piercing, and I felt the air grow heavier around me. "Come on, don't pay attention to him," Clara whispered, frightened, but something inside me told me I couldn't ignore this. The man's presence was the embodiment of all my fears. "What do you know about the house?" I asked, my voice trembling with defiance. "Ah, the house," he said with a laugh that carried a dark undertone. "It's a place where lost souls gather, where those who can't escape are always welcome." Without thinking, I took a step back, pulling Clara with me. "Stay away," I warned, feeling my grip on the situation slipping through my fingers. The man's smile widened, and a sense of impending danger filled the air. I knew I had to act, to uncover the truth before the house and its secrets consumed me forever. But what price would I have to pay to unravel this mystery? As I stepped away, a feeling of determination took hold of me. The house had tried to keep me, but it wouldn't win. I had to go back. But this time, I wouldn't go alone. I needed to gather others, those willing to face the darkness. The fight was just beginning. Could this have happened in reality? Leave your comment, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a like as we continue our journey. What would you do if everything you know turned into a dark labyrinth? That question echoed in my mind as I walked through the streets of my city, a place that had once been familiar but now felt menacing. The flickering lights of the buildings reflected my growing anxiety, and every sound breaking the night felt like a warning echo. My name is Lucas, a 32-year-old journalist. I had always had a curious eye for the truth, but lately, that curiosity had turned into a kind of obsession. I had started investigating a series of unexplained disappearances in the neighborhood. It all began with an article I read in a local newspaper. The victims were ordinary people, individuals with jobs, families, normal lives. But as more cases emerged, the feeling that something darker loomed over the city became increasingly undeniable. Tonight, the air was charged with a strange electricity, as if I were being watched. Every shadow cast by the streetlights seemed to move, and the murmurs of passers-by turned into mocking laughter. As I walked through an alley, I heard a creak behind me. My heart raced. It's just my imagination, I thought, but a part of me knew there was something more. The streets that once felt welcoming now seemed like a hostile maze. The streetlights flickered, as if trying to warn me of impending danger. The air carried the scent of smoke, and something else, something chemical. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling of unease intensified. There was a whisper in the wind, a murmur that seemed to call me, pulling me towards something I couldn't comprehend. I decided I had to find answers. I returned to the office where I had left all my notes. The lights were off, and the silence was overwhelming. As I opened the door, a chill ran down my spine. The office seemed empty, but the air was thick with tension. I started reviewing my notes, searching for patterns in the disappearances. Each page contained details that seemed to lead me toward a dark truth. However, as I read, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I glanced at the window and saw a shadow pass by quickly. Was it real, or was my mind playing tricks on me? Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the office. I turned, my heart pounding. There was no one there. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. It's just the wind, I told myself. But the wind hadn't broken the glass. Something was wrong. I decided it was time to leave. I needed fresh air, clarity. But as I closed the door behind me, I felt something shift in the darkness of the hallway. The whisper had turned into a dull scream, as if the city itself was groaning. As I walked down the hallway, the lights flickered more intensely. The silence had become oppressive. The familiar surroundings of the office were fading quickly, and a sense of unease consumed me. "Look at yourself, Lucas," I thought. "You've lost your mind." As I reached the exit, a shadow flickered in the corner of my vision. I stopped. It was as if something was hiding, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I turned my head slowly, and a cold shiver ran through my body as I realized I was not alone. A dark silhouette stood at the far end of the hallway. The figure moved, approaching slowly. I couldn't see its face, but the pressure in the air became unbearable. I heard a voice shouting at me to run, to get away from there. But at that moment, something inside me awakened. It was my job, my duty to uncover the truth. I turned around, ready to face whatever was lurking in the shadows. But as I did, a cold laugh echoed through the air. And in that instant, I understood that I had crossed a line. The darkness surrounding the city was no longer just a shadow. It was a tangible enemy, a dark force rapidly closing in. What was I willing to sacrifice to uncover the truth? The question became my mantra as I prepared to face the darkness. The air grew dense and cold. As the figure approached, a shiver ran down my spine. The laughter stopped abruptly, leaving behind an eerie echo that lingered in the empty hallway. At that moment, every part of me rebelled against the curiosity that had led me there. I stopped and took a deep breath, trying to calm my rising anxiety. The shadow didn't move. It remained there, an ominous presence waiting. The flickering office lights cast distorted shapes on the walls, and every shadow seemed to stretch, as if trying to reach something. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling slightly. There was no answer, only a heavy silence that felt like a shackle. I decided I had to act. I couldn't stay frozen. I slowly stepped back, searching for the exit, when suddenly the sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a figure emerge from the darkness. It was a tall, slender man, wearing a dark coat that seemed to absorb the light. His face was hidden beneath the shadow of a hat. "Lucas, right?" His voice was deep and smooth, but there was a threatening undertone that made me step back. "I've been waiting to meet you." "Who are you?" I asked, trying to stay calm. My mind raced, trying to remember if I had come across this man in my investigation. "I'm someone who knows what's happening in this city," he said, stepping forward. "Someone who can help you, or make everything much worse." I felt the discomfort turn into fear. "Help me? In what way?" I asked, my voice trembling. "With the disappearances," he replied, smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "The disappearances are just the surface. There's a world you don't see, a dark side of this city that's hidden in plain sight. But if you want answers, you need to be willing to take risks." The conversation grew more intense, and the atmosphere in the cafe became charged with tension. I decided I had to keep investigating. After a while, I said goodbye and left the cafe, feeling that every step brought me closer to something bigger, something darker. As I walked through the streets, a troubling thought began to form in my mind. Was I really prepared to uncover what was behind all these disappearances? The idea of a cult operating in the shadows was terrifying, but I couldn't give up. The truth was my only salvation. I returned to my apartment, feeling the weight of the investigation getting heavier. I opened my computer and searched for more information about the rumors of the cult. Hours passed quickly as I read stories of people claiming to have seen strange things, rituals in the dark, and encounters with hooded figures. But despite the evidence, there was an air of disbelief. People feared being labeled crazy or, worse yet, becoming another victim. That's when I decided I needed more direct information. I remembered there was an online forum where people discussed these stories. I joined and began interacting with other users. Some talked about strange visions and disturbing experiences, while others shared conspiracy theories that defied logic. One night, as I was browsing the forum, a message caught my attention. If you want to know the truth, go to the old mill at sunset. The warning froze my blood. The old mill was abandoned, and it was said to be a place frequented by those seeking answers. But it was also a place where many had disappeared. Adrenaline coursed through my veins. If I wanted to understand what was happening, I would have to risk going there. Fear mixed with excitement, and I knew I was on the verge of uncovering something that would change everything. As sunset approached, I left my apartment with my heart racing. The city was shrouded in shadows, and the atmosphere was oppressive. As I got closer to the mill, the sunlight faded, and a chilling cold enveloped me. The mill stood before me, its old walls covered in moss and shadows. I felt that every step I took echoed in the silence. Upon entering, the creaking wood beneath my feet broke the stillness, and a wave of unease washed over me. The place was dark, and a musty smell filled the air. I began to explore, searching for signs of life. The echo of my footsteps seemed to mock me, and every shadow felt like a threat. Suddenly, I heard a murmur. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart in my throat. The voice was coming from a room deeper inside. "Is anyone there?" I called, feeling my voice fade into the darkness. The murmur stopped abruptly. Silence became a deafening roar in my ears. I took a deep breath and cautiously moved toward the source of the sound. Shadows danced around me, and the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. As I peered into the room, I saw hooded figures gathered in a circle. Whispers reverberated in the air, and the environment was charged with unsettling energy. A chill ran down my spine. Unintentionally, I had ventured into the heart of the mystery I had been chasing. The truth I sought was closer than I imagined, but also more terrifying. I was ready to face whatever I was about to discover. The darkness was watching me, and I knew I had crossed a line of no return. The air in the mill was heavy and dense, as if each whisper from the hooded figures absorbed the light. The circle was illuminated by a faint flame that flickered, casting shadows that danced on the worn walls. My heart beat heavily, and a mix of fear and curiosity pushed me to move a little further. I watched the hooded figures closely. I couldn't see their faces, but their movements were fluid and confident. In the center of the circle was a table covered with a black cloth. On it, there were objects I couldn't identify: jars, candles, and strange symbols drawn with chalk. I shuddered when I realized I had entered a place where not only the truth was being discussed, but dark rituals were being practiced. A voice echoed among the murmurs. "The full moon will bring the change," said one figure, his voice deep. "The sacrifice must be made, and those who oppose us will be eliminated." My instincts warned me that I should leave, but curiosity kept me trapped. No, it can't be real, I thought. This is just madness. But deep down, I knew there was some truth in what I was hearing. At that moment, one figure separated from the group and headed toward the exit. My heart raced, and I decided to follow with the hope of gathering more information. The figure walked with determination, and I managed to stay close enough to hear their steps on the creaking wooden floor. We left the mill, and I realized that the night had grown even darker. The fog was beginning to envelop the area. The figure stopped in a nearby clearing, turning to face me. It was a woman, her face hidden by the hood, but her eyes shone with an intense light. "Why have you come?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but there was an air of authority in it. "I'm looking for answers," I replied, feeling my words barely escaping. "I want to understand what's happening in this city." She chuckled softly, and that sound was chilling. Answers come at a price, young one. Not everyone is ready for the truth you're seeking. I know there's a cult, I said, trying to stay calm, and I know the disappearances are connected to you. Why? What do you want? The woman took a step forward, coming close enough for me to see a scar on her cheek. We want the purification of our society. Those who stand in our way must be removed. Every sacrifice is a step towards the freedom of this place. My thoughts spun quickly. Sacrifices, freedom. Everything I had heard in the cafe and seen in the mill began to make sense. But it also filled me with terror. And the people who disappear, are they sacrifices? I asked, my voice trembling. Some of them are, she replied, her tone now firmer. But others simply don't understand. There are those who must be guided, forced to open their eyes to the truth. The darkness does not stop, and those who refuse to see will be consumed. At that moment, a chill ran down my body. I realized I was part of a much bigger game than I had imagined. What kind of cult are you? I asked, feeling the urgency to escape, but my feet felt glued to the ground. A cult that seeks balance, she said with an intense gaze. We are not the villains people think we are. We are the bearers of a new order. But now you must decide. Are you with us or against us? At that moment, I felt the fog thickening around me, as if the city itself was taking a collective breath. The decision I had to make was not just about me, but about everything I had uncovered. Every disappearance and every shadow in the night. What if I choose not to be with you? I asked, aware that my words might seal my fate. The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in her expression. Then perhaps you'll find yourself among those who must be guided. The choice is yours, but remember, the truth may be darker than you imagine. As he spoke, a sound interrupted the conversation. A crack behind us. I quickly turned around and saw a figure emerging from the fog. It was the man from the hallway. The one who had been waiting for me. Lucas, it's time to go, he said urgently. The woman looked at him with disdain. And what do you know about the truth? You're just a spectator in this fight. I know enough to understand that Lucas isn't ready for this, he replied, staring at me intently. You need to get out of here. There's no time for doubts. An internal conflict took hold of me. I wanted to stay, get more answers, but I also knew there was imminent danger. With no other option, I decided to follow the man, running toward the exit as the fog closed in behind us. Once we were outside, the city seemed to have come alive on its own. The streetlights flickered, and a sense of unease wrapped around me. Who are they really? I asked, trying to catch my breath. People who have let themselves be consumed by the darkness, the man replied. But they're not the only ones. There are others working in the shadows, trying to stop them. You need to be careful. You can't trust anyone. His words echoed in my mind as we moved further away from the mill. Reality was becoming more complex and terrifying. Why are you helping me? I asked, unable to hide my distrust. Because I see in you what others don't, he said. You have the curiosity and the determination to uncover the truth. But you're also vulnerable. You need to prepare for what's coming. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream shattered the quiet of the night. We stopped dead in our tracks, and my heart froze. What was that? I asked, fear invading every fiber of my being. It's what happens when things get dangerous, he replied, his face grim. We need to get out of here. The city doesn't forgive those who cross its path. With every step, the feeling of being watched grew. I knew I had crossed a line and that the search for the truth had led me to a place from which I could not return. Darkness loomed over me, and the question echoing in my mind was clear: could I survive what was coming? The air was dense and cold as I ran beside the stranger who had become my only hope. The echo of what resonated in the night seemed to grow closer, like a terrifying echo of what lurked in the shadows. I looked around, trying to catch any signs of danger, but the fog covered everything like a veil, hiding what was really behind us. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep calm, though panic bubbled in my chest. "We need to reach the refuge before they find us," he replied, not looking back. His voice was tense, as if every word could attract whatever was chasing us. "We can't stay here. They know you're involved now." My mind struggled to process everything I had learned. "Why did you choose me? Why didn't you go alone?" "Because not everyone can see what you've seen," he said, suddenly stopping. "You're a risk, but also an opportunity. The city needs someone willing to face the truth." "And what truth is that?" I asked, trying to stay focused on his figure. "There's a cult taking people, and something darker is lurking in the shadows." "Exactly? And that's not all. What they're doing has much larger repercussions than you can imagine. The entire city is trapped in a cycle of fear and control, but there are others like us fighting in the shadows." A sudden sound stopped us. A creak came from a nearby alley. The man raised his hand, signaling for me to remain silent. The tension was palpable. My heart pounded, resonating in my ears like a war drum. Then I saw it. A figure emerged from the shadows, its face hidden under a hood. I shuddered, recognizing the same silhouette I had seen in the mill. "Is it one of them?" I whispered. "Stay still," the man ordered, his gaze fixed on the figure. "Don't show fear." The figure moved forward, and the air grew even denser. "I come seeking answers," it said in a resonant voice that seemed to flow like a whisper of wind. "Lucas, you know you can't escape. The truth always finds its way." "Who are you?" I demanded, the courage I had feeling like it was about to fade away. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand that you are at the center of all of this," the figure replied. "What you witnessed at the mill is just the beginning. You cannot escape your destiny." My mind spun in confusion. "Destiny? I just want to understand what's happening." "Understanding it is your choice," the figure continued. "But I warn you, there is no turning back. Those who know the truth must face it." Without warning, the man beside me moved, grabbing my arm and pulling me backward. "Don't listen to their lies. They are trying to manipulate you," he whispered urgently. The hooded figure smiled, a gesture that sent chills down my spine. "They are not lies, young one. They are warnings. The darkness you have touched will not stop. You have become part of this game, and it is time for you to choose your side." "Lucas, we have to leave now," my companion shouted, breaking the spell of the figure. We started running through the streets, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the night. The figure stayed in the alley, watching us with an intensity that made me feel like I was being devoured by its gaze. The fog enveloped us, hiding the familiar streets that were beginning to seem strange and threatening. "What was that?" I asked, the cold air filling my lungs. "One of them. There are more like him. They're everywhere, watching," the man replied, his eyes blinking with concern. "We need to get to the refuge. There's no time to waste." Adrenaline pumped through my veins as we ran. Every shadow seemed to come alive around us, and the echoes of our fast breaths mixed with the sound of footsteps that could have been behind us. Fear of the unknown settled in my mind. Finally, we reached an old brick building. The windows were covered in dust, and the door creaked ominously as it opened. We entered, and the man slammed the door shut, making sure no one followed us. "Where are we?" I asked, looking around. The inside was dark, with furniture covered in white sheets. A sense of abandonment and neglect hung in the air. "This is our temporary refuge," he explained, his voice a whisper. "Here we can plan our next move and gather others who are willing to fight." As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I began to notice the faces of other people peering out from the shadows. There was an air of distrust and determination in their gazes. Are they also part of the fight? I asked, feeling a bit more hopeful. Yes, the man said. Each of them has seen what you've seen. Each has lost something or someone. The city is trapped in a web of darkness, but together we can dismantle it. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The responsibility of knowing the truth was beginning to weigh on me. What do I have to do? I asked, uncertainty and anguish filling my voice. You must be prepared for what's coming, he replied, his tone grave. What we have discovered so far is only the tip of the iceberg. The fight ahead will be intense and dangerous. There are no guarantees. What if I can't face it? I asked, unsure. Then you must find your own truth, he said. Each of us has a role to play, and the decision of how to move forward is up to you. As the group began to discuss strategies and plans, a sense of urgency overwhelmed me. The fight for the truth wasn't just a battle against a cult. It was a confrontation with my own fears. What had started as a search for answers was turning into a struggle for survival. And in that moment, I realized I had crossed a point of no return. The darkness of the city hadn't just found me. It had awakened something in me that I could never ignore. The fight was beginning, and I was ready to face it, no matter the cost. Have you ever felt like you're being watched, even when you're alone? Like an invisible shadow following every one of your steps, lurking in the darkness? No one else seems to notice, but you know something is wrong. It starts as just a feeling, like a distant whisper in your mind. But what if it's not just that? What if there's something there, something you can't see, but that's looking for you? It was an ordinary night when I realized something was wrong. The air was cold, and the city, usually bustling, seemed to be submerged in a strange and heavy silence. I was still awake, sitting on my couch, staring at the blank screen of my TV. I didn't care what time it was. Life seemed to stop in those moments of insomnia, when the mind moves faster than the body. I got up to go to the kitchen. The sound of my footsteps on the wooden floor created a series of hollow echoes in the empty air. The house had always been quiet, too quiet, and in that silence any noise became bigger, louder. I opened the fridge door, and the glow of the cold light made me squint. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. A couple of water bottles, some food. I closed the door and returned to the living room. But something made me stop. A shadow, moving quickly, vanished down the hallway of the house. I froze. Was it my imagination? Had it just been a reflection? My heart beat faster. I cautiously approached the hallway, but when I reached the end, everything seemed in order. The shadows danced slowly across the walls as the moonlight streamed through the windows. There was nothing strange, nothing that could explain the cold feeling on my skin. Then I heard something, a low, soft whisper, but clearly present. I couldn't make out the words, just a murmur carried by the wind. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly turned toward the living room, but I saw nothing. The house was the same, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. I began walking toward the living room, but as I did, I couldn't help but look back. Some footsteps, or at least what sounded like footsteps, followed me. Every time I stopped, the sound would fade, but it didn't take long before it started again. My thoughts were in turmoil. It's just the tiredness, I repeated to myself. It's just anxiety. But why? The air was so dense. Why did my senses feel so heightened to every movement, every sound? A faint smell of dampness filled the room, a scent I had never noticed in the house before. I moved toward the window to open it, seeking fresh air. But as I did, a shadow moved quickly in front of the moonlight, crossing from side to side like a specter. My breath quickened. What was that? Was I imagining things? Was it the tiredness, the loneliness, or was there something else? I looked again at the hallway, but now it seemed longer, darker. The moonlight, usually comforting, now seemed overwhelming, casting shadows that danced in an unsettling way. Something wasn't right, and even though I tried to rationalize the feeling of being followed, being watched, it wouldn't go away. My mind started to wonder, what if I wasn't alone in this house? I stood there, at the threshold of the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. The house, once so familiar, no longer felt safe. Every corner, every crack in the walls seemed to hide something, as if the very structure of the house was changing. The shadows stretched strangely, as if they were taking on a life of their own. Was my mind playing tricks on me, or was something really happening? I decided to step forward, even though my body trembled. The footsteps that followed me were closer now, but I couldn't tell where they were coming from. The sound of feet on the floor was clearer, more present. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but I couldn't stop myself from looking back once more. There was nothing, but that didn't reassure me. On the contrary, the absence of something visible made the feeling of threat even greater. I continued down the hallway without knowing why. Maybe I hoped to find some logical explanation, something that would tell me all of this was just a product of my imagination. But as I moved further, the air became denser, more oppressive. The smell of dampness grew stronger, and something inside me told me I shouldn't continue. But I couldn't stop. Something pushed me forward. The hallway seemed to stretch, and the walls that were normally full of memories now appeared empty and gloomy. Every photo frame I passed seemed more distant, more foreign. The lights, which once softly illuminated, now flickered and blinked, plunging the house into an unsettling darkness. As I moved forward, the shadows seemed to move, as if taking on a life of their own. Suddenly, I heard a door slam shut at the end of the hallway. My body tensed. I knew there was no one else in the house. No one else was there. My thoughts started to swirl, a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What was happening? My legs moved without my control, and before I knew it, I was standing in front of a closed door, a door I had never noticed before. It was old, dark wood with an aged iron handle. It was closed, but something told me I needed to open it. An irrational but irresistible impulse urged me to touch the handle. When I did, I felt a chill run down my spine. The door creaked open with a low groan, and as it opened, the darkness on the other side seemed to swallow the light. The air inside the room was even denser, with a palpable weight that made breathing difficult. The footsteps following me were now clearer, closer. I could hear them right behind me, and a cold sweat began to form on my forehead. My mind struggled to find any logical explanation, but it couldn't. There was nothing that could justify what I was feeling or what I was seeing. Little by little, the light in the room began to distort. The shadows cast on the walls did not behave as they should. They stretched and twisted unnaturally. Something moved in the darkness. Something I couldn't identify, but whose presence I felt getting closer and closer. My breathing became faster and more shallow, and the sound of my steps merged with those other steps, the ones that couldn't possibly be mine. In an attempt to distance myself, I took a step back, but something stopped me. A cold, dry hand rested on my shoulder. It wasn't my hand, it was something else, something I couldn't see, but that I could feel with every fiber of my being. Panic seized me, and the terror of the unknown paralyzed me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. The hand squeezed a little tighter, and the room began to spin, as if I was being sucked into a spiral of darkness. The shadows grew denser, wrapping around me completely until I could no longer distinguish where I was. My mind overflowed, and one single question began to repeat in my head. What is this? A soft, almost imperceptible laugh floated through the air. I couldn't tell where it came from, but it froze my blood. I turned, searching for an exit, but the door was no longer there. Only an endless hallway of shadows remained, and the sound of my own footsteps that no longer seemed to be mine. The air was heavy, as if every breath took more effort than usual. My chest rose and fell quickly, but I couldn't stop looking around, searching for some explanation, some way out. But there was nothing, just darkness. The hallway, once familiar, was now a maze of shadows that seemed to move at their own pace, twisting and changing with each passing moment. My eyes couldn't follow the movement. They slid fleetingly and indistinctly, as if they didn't belong to this world. I forced myself to take a step forward, even though I felt something pushing me back. Every fiber of my being screamed that I should escape, but fear kept me in place. The walls, once solid, now seemed to pulse as if they were alive. The dark hues cast by the shadows constantly changed, stretching in unnatural ways. A penetrating cold began to rise along my back, as if the very air was becoming denser, more impenetrable. But the worst part wasn't the cold, nor the darkness, nor the shadows. The worst part was that I could no longer tell if the noises I was hearing were real, or if my mind was playing tricks on me. The footsteps that had followed me had stopped. Only silence reigned, but it was a terrifying silence. A void that seemed to consume everything, as if the sound itself was being suppressed by something lurking in the shadows. Where was the hand that had touched my shoulder? Where was the laugh I had heard just moments ago? Everything had disappeared, as if the nightmare had dissolved into nothing, but the fear remained, lodged in my chest like an invisible weight. A low whisper broke the silence. It wasn't a sound from outside or from inside my head, as if someone were whispering directly into my ear. The murmur was incomprehensible, but I felt every word as if it were piercing my mind. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. I was trapped in an invisible web, a web that my mind couldn't grasp. Suddenly, a faint light appeared in the distance, so weak that at first I doubted whether it was real or just a reflection in my eyes. But the light grew, slowly coming closer, until I saw that it was an old lamp hanging from the ceiling. But it wasn't an ordinary lamp. The light it emitted wasn't warm, it wasn't yellow, it was cold, pale, like the light of the moon, but more distant, more alien. My mind screamed not to approach, to run away, but my feet moved autonomously, as if something else was controlling me. When I reached under the lamp, I could see that I was not alone. The shadow that had followed me down the hallway was now beside me. It wasn't an ordinary shadow or a blurry figure. It was a clear silhouette, tall and thin, made of darkness that seemed to absorb the light itself. It had no face, no details, just an imposing figure that remained fixed at the edge of my vision, as if waiting for me to make the first move. The air grew even thicker. As if everything around me was becoming denser, the figure remained motionless, but something in its movements, or rather, in the lack of them, froze my blood. I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. The footsteps I'd heard before were now a constant pulse in my brain, echoing with every beat of my heart. I tried to speak, to scream, but the words got stuck in my throat. My lips wouldn't respond. Fear paralyzed me completely. The figure began to move, but not like a person. It was more of a glide, as if its body floated slightly above the ground, defying the laws of physics. Every movement was unsettling, precise, calculated. It was close, getting closer, and something inside me told me not to look, not to see what was about to happen, but I couldn't help it. The figure approached slowly, unhurried, as if it relished my terror. I stood there, watching, feeling time stretch as if it had no end. The figure stopped right in front of me, just a few centimeters away, and finally, something changed in its form. The shadow transformed, elongated, and I could see that it wasn't just a shadow. It was something more, something much older and more malevolent. It had no face, but I could feel its presence with an intensity that tore me apart inside. The cold light from the lamp flickered once more, and for a moment the figure ceased to be just a shadow. I saw something behind the darkness. A pair of eyes glowing with an unnatural gleam, a shine that did not belong to this world. My legs gave way, but I couldn't fall. Something invisible was holding me up, keeping me upright while the figure continued to stare at me. A murmur began to fill the air, but it wasn't a whisper. It was a distant, deep scream, coming from the very heart of the darkness itself. "What are you?" I managed to whisper, though I wasn't sure if I had actually spoken the words aloud. I received no answer. The figure, like an echo of evil, began to slowly fade, but it didn't leave. It stayed there, right at the edge of my vision, while the darkness surrounding it seemed to devour everything in its path. Fear choked me. I was trapped in a nightmare, and I didn't know if I would ever manage to escape it. The darkness began to completely engulf me, as if time itself had stopped. I could hear nothing except my frantic breathing and the wild pounding of my heart. I was trapped, immobilized, and the figure before me, the faceless shadow, seemed to grow larger and larger. My eyes couldn't look away, though my mind desperately tried to deny what I was seeing. Every time I thought it would fade, the presence became denser, more tangible. An unnatural cold began to penetrate my bones, making my whole body tremble. Every inch of my skin stood on end, as if invisible hands were touching me. There was no logical explanation. The light from the lamp remained weak, as if it were struggling against something, as if the very light feared that shadow. But the light began to fade slowly, as if someone were blowing out a candle as it came closer to me. It was a dream. It couldn't be. The fear was too real, too present. I could feel the heat of my skin and the penetrating cold that seeped into every corner of my mind. The air was no longer air. It was something else, something dense that made every breath harder to take. My throat was dry as if I were drowning. But the worst of the fears was that deep knowledge. Something was waiting. Something didn't want me to move, to escape. Finally, the shadow seemed to move. It wasn't a glide or a figure crawling. No. The shadow rose as if stretching itself, towering above me, reaching a height I had never imagined possible. In its form, I could distinguish shapes, disturbing details. Not a face, but something else. A mouth without lips, just teeth, bones, and a macabre smile that pierced through me mercilessly. The eyes, those eyes that glowed with a shine that didn't belong to light, but to the darkness itself, weren't human eyes. They were empty, but filled with infinite malice. The shadow began to approach. Each step resonated in my mind. It was real. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand it. My mind searched for reasons, but every explanation I found seemed more absurd, more ridiculous. What could I do? What could I scream? There was no escape. I was trapped in a dimension I couldn't understand, in a nightmare that had no end. My legs, which hadn't responded before, now trembled, but not from fear, from exhaustion. The anguish had overwhelmed me, and all I wanted was to wake up, to escape. But the shadow kept coming closer, like a huge wave of darkness devouring everything in its path. I could feel its presence so close to me that my whole body vibrated with terror. And then, something changed. The figure no longer moved as before, gliding calmly. Now it advanced rapidly, erratically. Its movements were fast, uncontrollable, as if it were being driven by a force far greater than its own form. Each step thundered, making the walls around it seem to tremble. The shadow was no longer just surrounding me, it was touching me. I felt as though I were being absorbed by something invisible. Something that devoured me without my ability to resist. But there was no pain, no physical contact. It was a void, a sensation of being stripped of my being, as if the shadow wanted to consume everything I was, everything I had been. I felt my own essence fading, my body growing light as if I were floating. My mind screamed, but no sound came out. Only that pressure remained, that feeling of falling into an endless abyss. And it was then that something broke the stillness. A scream, a desperate scream that came from the deepest part of my being. Something I didn't know still existed inside me. But the scream was not mine. It was not human. It was a cry of desperation, of suffering, of something that had been waiting to get out for a long time. The figure, the shadow, stopped for a moment, as if something had interrupted its advance. Its form twisted, but not in an organic way, more like something was fighting against its very existence. Suddenly, everything vanished. The shadow, the figure, the fear, it all dissolved into the air as if it had never existed. The light from the lamp returned to its normal state, bright and warm. The hallway, which had once been dark and threatening, now seemed empty. Silence. Just silence. But something inside me knew it wasn't over. Something remained. Something was left behind, and I couldn't let it go. The feeling of being watched returned, but it was no longer just a vague sensation. Now it was clear, palpable. I was being followed, hunted. And though the shadow had disappeared, I knew that somewhere in the darkness, it still lingered. The silence was deafening. The light from the lamp, which had once seemed fearful, was now the only source of reality remaining in the hallway. However, something was not right. I couldn't stop staring at the shadows projected on the walls, which stretched and distorted into grotesque shapes. There was something beyond the light, something hiding in the gloom, not quite disappearing. I forced myself to take a step forward. My mind tried to find some logic, some explanation for what had happened, but the more I tried, the emptier my reasoning felt. The figure, the shadow, had it been real? Or was it just a product of my mind, of a fear that had already consumed me too much? I was so confused that I couldn't even trust my own thoughts. My breath was shallow, as if I were still running through that endless hallway, but there was nowhere to run. I was trapped. The feeling of being watched lingered, as if there were no escape. I didn't dare look back, but something inside me told me that if I did, the figure would be there, lurking, waiting. I couldn't lose hope. I had to get out. I had to find a way out. Something that would return me to reality. Or so I thought. The footsteps I had heard earlier, which had stopped for a moment, began slowly again. Very slowly, but steadily. They were not human steps. They were not ordinary steps. They were heavy, as if something or someone was dragging a huge weight. Each echo made my heart race even faster. The walls seemed to be closing in around me, as if the hallway itself were holding them back. I whispered unintentionally, but the response came in the form of a new distortion in the air, a change in the environment that froze me completely. The shadows seemed to move of their own accord, sliding across the walls with a speed I couldn't have imagined. The air grew dense, difficult to breathe, as if something were absorbing the oxygen in the room. I tried to move forward, but my feet wouldn't respond. The feeling of cold intensified. My fingers were stiff, my legs were shaking. The darkness, which had only surrounded me before, now seemed to enter me, invading, covering me. My muscles trembled, and in the distance I could see a figure moving at high speed. It wasn't the shadow, it wasn't the same presence, but something in its movement, in its form, told me that it was also part of what was chasing me. A kind of disfigured creature, seemingly made of fragments of darkness and broken light. An impossible being that glided effortlessly through the air, quickly approaching me. My body reacted instinctively, pushing me forward, running without thinking, without looking back. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know if I was running toward an end or another type of horror. I only knew I had to escape. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder, closer. I could feel it. Something was chasing me, something that didn't want me to stay alive. My mind was crumbling. Every thought became blurry, as if reality itself were starting to disintegrate around me. I ran for what seemed like an eternity, with the sound of the footsteps getting closer and closer. The walls began to change, to deform. The light from the lamp was no longer constant. It flickered and faded, as if someone were extinguishing the stars of an endless night. In the darkness, I could see shadows move, slide, following me. The air was heavy, almost unbearable to breathe. And when I thought I couldn't go on anymore, when my legs began to falter, I saw a door at the end of the hallway. The door. I ran toward it with all my strength, not looking back. The sound of the footsteps was deafening. Every time I got closer to the door, it seemed to move farther away. But something inside me pushed me to keep going, with one last burst of energy. I reached the door, and with trembling hands, I opened it. What I saw on the other side paralyzed me. It was the same hallway, the same darkness, the same echoes, the same horror. I had been running in circles, trapped in the same place. The door wasn't an exit, it was an illusion, a trap set to catch my mind. The shadow was still there, waiting in the distance, and though I couldn't see it directly, I could feel its presence in every corner. My breath quickened even more. I was trapped in the place in my mind. And in that moment, I knew the truth. The shadow wasn't an external being. It was part of me, my fear, my desperation. Something had awakened inside me, something that had been asleep for years. And now I couldn't escape. I would never escape. Thank you for listening to our stories until the end. Now, if you haven't already, you can leave your like and subscribe. See you in the next episodes.